This is chapter 9, um, and it's a chapter about basically buying a house. And the statistics are that the average American buys a house around the age of 30, give or take a few years. So I know for many of you, this is not going to be the most relevant chapter because you're not going to be buying a house right at the moment. But others of you are maybe have some money saved for a down payment, are going to think about it. Okay? So anyway, this is personal finance, learning about everything that you should really understand about your finances, and owning a home is one of the most kind of, for most people, is their most valuable asset that they have. So understanding kind of buying and selling is a good thing. There's your objectives. You can of course read through those. So I grabbed this chart just to show you, and it's gone up here a lot in 2020 because a lot of people, because of COVID, said I want to stop renting this really small apartment. I'm going to go buy a house. So the numbers jump. Now when we say no, I know that looks like a lot, but we're really going from 64 to 68%. So this goes all the way back to the 1960s. And you can see we pretty much have a bottom line here of about 63%, and at the max is around 69%. So basically in a 60%, about 2/3 of Americans own homes. So when we're looking at evaluating our alternatives, you got to think, what is your lifestyle, what are your personal preferences, your budget, whatever. A lot of different things are going to impact that. There's opportunity cost to choosing certain houses. So for example, when you are saving money for a down payment, one of your blanks, and I'll let you fill in the blanks here. Commuting, tax, and equity, those are your blanks there for the moment. So interest lost on money used for a down payment. Okay, so that's what we call opportunity cost. You can say I either save the money for down payment, and so the benefit is you get a down payment and be able to buy the house. The opportunity cost is it's money that could be used for investing. So again, so what this means is the money that you put in a down payment, once you've bought your house, that's no longer in your hands, and that money you could be using to invest in something else. Okay, or same thing is you put money down for a security deposit for an apartment, and that's in your landlord's hands, no longer in your hands. Now, in these days of extremely low interest rates, it's not that big a deal. Okay? A big thing when we talk about housing is the time and cost of commuting to work, and because you got to figure out gas prices, transportation costs, or whatever, and that can be a major impact on determining where you buy a house or rent a house, if you will. So renters lose tax advantages and equity growth. It simply means that when you rent, you don't get to deduct your rent unless you're like a business, but individuals, you don't get to do that, and you typically don't pay the real estate taxes, which is a good thing. But if you own a house, you get to deduct the interest on your mortgage. And you also have chance. Equity growth simply means that the value of your house, as it grows in value, means your equity grows in value because your debt slowly gets paid down. The value of your house goes up, therefore how much you have in it, equity, goes up. Okay. So I know you can't read this on the screen here, but it is Exhibit 9.2, and what's nice, and that's not even the best graphic there, I see. But what it does, it just shows you all the housing alternatives. So you could be renting an apartment, renting a house, owning a new house, owning I'll call it a used house, previously owned house, owning a condominium, owning cooperative, which is pretty rare, owning a mobile home, a manufactured home or something. Okay? And so if you go in your book, it just shows you kind of all the advantages and disadvantages versus each one. I'm not going to ask you to memorize this, but in case you're thinking about one or the other, most of you are probably going to be right here renting an apartment when you graduate. Okay? That's 9 out of 10 of you will be doing that. So I don't want to spend a lot of time on that. All right. So sorry about that. So in terms of getting a rental place, so this is the process that all of you will be doing, most of you will be doing. There's all kinds of websites on there. Just Google rental properties and you'll find them. Apartment rental, Rent Jungle. There's all kinds of them out there. And what they can tell you is, kind of roughly what the costs are per city and so on. And you can even use Zillow. Zillow is a fun place to go, and they even have apartments on it. So anyway, when selecting an apartment, consider the location. All of you, how far away do you want to be from your work? Do you want to be downtown Columbus, Cleveland, Cincinnati, wherever you're going to go? Building exterior, for most of you, since it's a rental unit, you're probably not going to care that much about it. You're going to be much more interested in what it looks like on the inside, and the layout and the facilities. Okay? You might be responsible for some maintenance, meaning typically inside, but outside probably not, unless it's like a house where you'd have to mow the yard or something. So this chart, once again from your book, talks about, here are like the four major steps. Select an area, look at the lease, and this says talk to a lawyer about unclear aspects of the lease. Very seldom should you have to talk to a lawyer. It's going to be most landlords, as many of you have already dealt with landlords here in Athens, they have a standard lease that they give to all of their tenants, and there's probably not a whole lot you can do to ever get it changed. It is always important to make sure, I would take pictures with the person there of what the unit looks like beforehand, so there's scratches in the wall or whatever, that you're not held accountable when you leave. Okay. Here's the big thing. Remember that even if you have a roommate, if that roommate leaves and both of your names are on the lease, then you can be held responsible for the entire lease. So major thing to keep in consideration there. You might want to consider renter's insurance in case you have a lot of valuables in there, and that's pretty much it. So big advantage of renting is mobility, meaning that you can simply get up and leave, once your lease is up, whereas with a house it's much more involved to do that. You typically have fewer responsibilities. You don't have near as much maintenance. You have fewer financial concerns because you don't pay property taxes, insurance, and upkeep, and so on. So it's just a lot less hassle to rent than to anything. Okay? And you typically have lower initial costs because all you really would have would be a security deposit, okay? Which is usually quite a bit less than a down payment for a house you would want to buy. So the disadvantages, you really don't get any financial benefits from buying a house. The only thing could be that, if you think about it, your rent is typically going to be less than your mortgage payment, okay, or your house payment. And so let's just, for example, let's say this is $500 and this is $1,200. Okay? You could take the difference. If you were able to come up with $1,200, you could invest the $700 difference. Now that way it gets really close to, I've seen calculations where people say, hey, it's getting expensive to buy a house now. You could rent and save some money on like real estate taxes and so on, and invest kind of the difference or a little bit more than what you're paying in rent. And at the end of whatever 10 or 20 years, you have this money's been built up, so you have equity. You don't have a house. So my point is, it's not always black and white that buying a house is by far the best financial decision. There are scenarios where it makes sense financially to rent a house. Now, personally, I'm not a fan of renting because I want to be able to paint my house whatever color I want. I don't have to worry about my animals in my house making a mess. I can pound a nail anywhere I want. So anyway, I like that fact. Okay? So you might have a restricted lifestyle if you're going to rent, in terms of remodeling. You may not be able to have any pets. You got to be careful about how much sound you make, etc. Okay? So all of you know pretty much what a lease is. That's the document you have to sign. And you know pretty much the rest of that. Okay? So the home buying process, benefits of owning a home, kind of pride. You say, look, this is mine. Imagine if you were just driving a rental car all the time as opposed to your own car. It is nice. It's kind of part of what we call the American dream, is that you have your own property. And it's just nice to know when you go to bed at night, knowing that where you are sleeping is yours. And no one can like force you out of there. Of course, unless you don't make your payments or whatever. So the financial benefits, the property taxes that you pay, and the mortgage interest, you can deduct it from your taxes, so that helps lower your taxes. Potentially, not always, just depend on taxes. Potential increase in the value of your home. And as I said earlier, this is the largest asset for most Americans. And a lot of times once their kids leave and they retire, they will often sell their larger house and scale down to a smaller house, and then they can take advantage of some of that equity that they've built up. Okay? So this is kind of what I was talking about. Benefits is you can express your individuality, do whatever you want, because no one's telling you what to do. So once again, kind of the home buying process, and I know most of you are not going to be doing this for 10 years, so really don't want to spend time on it. And that means if you want to read it, you can get it out of your book there. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So most of you will not be doing this for a while. Some of the disadvantages is that the hardest part is coming up with that down payment. Kind of that, I would say the average down payment for a house is about 10%. So it's 10% of the price. The median price in the U.S. right now is around $300,000. So 10% of that is 30 grand. Now, there are some programs that will let you put down less than that. I know, like the bank I work at, we've done as low as 3%. Now, when you go that low, you also have to pay for some insurance in case you aren't able to pay for the home. Okay? So anyway, 300,000 median price. Of course, you don't necessarily have to buy a house like that. You can buy a decent house for 100 grand, depending on the location. But anyway, the point is, down payment is the biggest factor holding most people back from getting a home. Okay. So limited mobility, it might be difficult to sell your home quickly if for some reason you're changing jobs. So kind of rule of thumb is, if you're going to buy a house, you should really try to plan on being in that area or staying in the house for like 5 years. Okay? Because you have, it's not like buying any other asset. You have a lot of legal costs, bank costs, what we call closing costs when you buy a home, that are like, you can't like recoup those unless the house is really significantly increased in value. And for most places, it's not going to go up a whole lot in 5 years. So anyway, that's just kind of a rule of thumb. Whereas rental, you can kind of be a lot more flexible. So you have higher living costs, and the fact that you have to do your own maintenance, repairs, and you have real estate taxes. So different types. This is what most of us think of. Single, like probably where most of you live when you go home to your parents, single family dwelling. You could have a duplex. So a lot of people that start out, could be you right now, is to get a duplex, and it means you save a little bit for a down payment, and then on one side of the house you live, on the other side you rent it out. And a lot of times that rent, might be even able to pay for your whole mortgage payment. So something to think about. Condominium is your own individual. So a condominium is like an apartment. So apartments you rent, condominiums you own. And you can rent some condominiums, but typically that's kind of like the biggest difference between condominium. Right? So you've all seen mobile homes, and the biggest disadvantage with mobile homes, I've been in a number of mobile homes, and a lot of them are very, very nice. When you go inside, you have no idea you're in a mobile home. But the problem is they tend to depreciate, go down in value, whereas houses often tend to appreciate, go up in value. So big thing to know about mobile homes. So the price that you can pay, so we're talking about how much you can afford, is based on the price and the down payment. So uh, also consider your mortgage rates and so on. So they call this the handyman special. You know, it might need work. I'm sure you've seen all the HGTV shows about people flipping houses, remodeling them, and so on. So this link I have down here, I'm going to click on here in a second, and the idea is to show you like how much salary you would have to have in certain cities. So it's kind of a fun link to go to. Okay, so here it is, and let's just click on Austin. So Austin shows you that, you know, right now the mortgage rate is about 3.15, and therefore the monthly payment on a house would be about $1,800 based on a price of $373. So I told you median price was $300, so it's more expensive down there in Austin a little bit. There'd be your monthly payment. So they're saying, look, if you made a salary of $79,000, you could buy that house. Most of you will be graduating, maybe making in the 70s. So you wouldn't be able to buy, you know, as fancy as a house as that. And then here's all the cities they have. Here's Columbus, what they say. Look at the home price difference from Columbus. Okay, so that froze up for a minute. Sorry about that. This is Columbus. Notice how much less the home price is compared to Austin. Salary $51,000. So that's doable, assuming you can make the down payment. So when you're thinking about a location, be aware of what we call the zoning laws. The zoning laws are the ones that kind of regulate what you can and cannot do in your house, in your yard, fencing and things like that. So it might be, some places will be as down to like you can only paint your house certain colors. You may not be able to put a satellite dish up on your roof or something. So just need to be aware of that. And if you're going to have kids, you might want to think about the school system for many families. That's, of course, a critical piece of information. And you're going to use, of course, probably a real estate agent, someone that'll help you buy or sell a home. Okay. Once you do that, you'll have to hire someone to do a home inspection if you're going to buy a house. Determining the home price, of course, the seller is going to tell you what the home price is. And the way it typically works, when I mentioned back here, the real estate agent, typically the seller pays the commission, which is typically 6%. In America, it's usually around 6%, which means that, so if I'm selling a house for $100,000 and I get $100,000 for it, $6,000 I have to pay to my realtor. My realtor will then, if my realtor helps me put out the for sale sign, he or she does that, and then a buyer comes with another realtor, then they split that 6%. One gets 3, the other gets 3. If it's my realtor happens to find a buyer because they have many clients, then sometimes they'll reduce that down to 5% since they're getting more than typically the 3% that they would get. Okay? So, but the person selling the property has to pay that commission. So you have a home price and then you negotiate the purchase price. There have been times, especially during kind of COVID, when there's been a lot of bidding on homes, and people will actually get in a bidding war and will pay more than what the initial asking price is. But once you put down once you have an offer, you will often put down what we call earnest money. It's like a deposit that a third party will hold on to it to say, okay, you've in good faith entered into this agreement. Okay. So the financing of a home buying is, once again, determining the down payment. If you do not put down more than 20%, okay, then you have to pay for what's called private mortgage insurance, or PMI. And that is to protect the lender in case something were to happen, you didn't make your payments, and they have to take over the house. Then that protects them and also protects you. It helps pay off, or basically pays off the mortgage if for some reason something happens. Okay? Uh, so I keep talking about mortgage. So what is a mortgage? There's your blank. So a mortgage is just a fancy name for a loan. Okay? It's just like a loan, but it's usually long term, and it's on a piece of property. And you can get a mortgage from about anywhere, and the home is the collateral for the mortgage. So if you don't make the payments, the bank gets the house. And the lenders typically use like a 33 or 38%, and that can vary. But here's an example of how that works, and that's on your page right there. So I'm not going to walk through each one of these steps. I think it's all fairly straightforward of how it works out. There's that 38% there, and they say, okay, that's like the maximum you could pay based on your income and so on. Points. So a lot of times what will happen is you'll see, okay, 3% interest on your mortgage and then 1 point. A point is equal to 1% of the loan amount. So if you're borrowing $200,000, that's the loan amount. 1 point, okay, would equal $2,000 or 1%. And what happens is you might see something like this, 2.75%. So here's bank A and here's bank B, but this might be 2 points. So what you're doing is you're kind of buying down your interest rate over time by kind of putting money up front. So you have to pay the points right up front. So in terms of how you get a mortgage, or in terms of some of the terms, as you could do a fixed rate, this is what we call a conventional mortgage, and which means your payments, you have equal payments over one of these periods of time. 15 and 30 are the most popular. And for most first-time buyers, it's usually 30 years. So the longer you go, of course, the lower your payment, because you're making a lot, 15 to 30, you're making twice as many payments on the same borrowed amount, so the amount goes down. This is what we call amortizing. Loan is amortized, which means the balance is reduced with each payment. There are also VA loans, FHA loans, and they often have lower down payments and lower interest, but you sometimes have to pay like an insurance to do that. We're not going to get into those. You can also do what's called an ARM, adjustable rate mortgage, which just means it changes as interest rates change. Right now, interest rates are historically low, and people think there's no way they're going to go lower, and they just almost keep going down. They went down to like 0. So ARM might be a little bit risky in today's environment. Not that much risky. It doesn't look like rates are going to change that much. But you will often have a rate cap. So right now, I don't know what ARMs are selling for, maybe like 3%, and they might say the rate cap might be something like 6%. So it's not going to go up crazy amount. You do have kind of a cap there. Interest-only mortgage, these are extremely rare. These are cases where people oftentimes just want to buy a house for maybe a year or two. They want to flip it, they want to remodel it and sell it later, so they just want to only pay the interest on it. So none of the mortgage payment goes towards the loan amount. Why? Because it's interest only. You'll have higher payments will occur later in the loan because you eventually have to start making principal payments. It can be very dangerous if the property declines, because then you'll end up owing more than what you borrowed. So you just have to do the math on your calculator. It really depends on the interest rates. But with a 15 compared to a 30 year, depending once again if the interest rates are a little bit higher than they are now probably, you could save literally over $150,000 on a $200,000 house. And we talked about this in Finance 3000, at least if you had me, when we did time value of money. I found this chart, and it's showing you from the 1970s to last year, kind of what the 15 and 30 year rates were. So here we have a high of about, I know it's kind of hard to read, about 18%. So that's 18% for your house mortgage. Now, that's very rare. That was one point in time back in the 80s, okay? And you can see here, ever since then, it's gone down. And now this is 3%, which is right there for now. and it's hard to say which way it's going to go. A lot of people think now economy's going to start picking up, and it's probably going to slowly start going back up. But you never know. When we were down, we keep hitting new lows. I kept saying it's hard to imagine it's going to go up. But you can see it's been in this 2 to 4 range for the last 10 years or so. A second mortgage simply means that first mortgage would be like you buy a house, the bank lends you money on it. They are the first person to get money back if you can't make the payments. Second mortgage means, so you bought a house for, let's say, $400,000. You owe $100,000. This is the first mortgage to your first bank. Okay? You still have $300,000 in equity. You could take out a second mortgage, often known as like a home equity loan. Sorry, I can't write here. Second mortgage to another bank for maybe $200,000. Okay, second mortgage. So if the house were sold, this bank gets paid off first. This person gets paid off second. That's all that's known. Okay, and we call that a home equity loan because you're taking a loan based on the fact that you have equity in that house. Refinancing. So what is refinancing? To finance means you went to the bank and you got money to buy it. Refinancing means you do it again. Okay? So your parents might have taken out a loan, a mortgage at 8%. Let's say, imagine, let's go back to the 1980s. 1980s when interest rates were 18%. And in the following years, they went down to like 7%. So what should you do? As it goes down, you can take out a new loan, you can refinance, take out a new loan at a lower rate, okay, a lower rate, pay off your old loan. And usually it doesn't make sense unless the rate drops at least about a percentage point because there's so many costs involved in getting a new loan. Should you pay off your mortgage early? Well, first of all, whenever you get a mortgage, always try to get one that has no prepayment penalties. So in case you come into a lot of money, you can pay it off. So there's a lot of factors here you could consider about should you pay it off. So I have people often asking me, hey, I've got a mortgage at 4%, should I pay it off? Because I have $100,000 sitting in the bank. Well, you could put that money into the stock market, and the stock market's, let's say, making 10%. So if you paid off your loan, okay, you pay it off, then you're basically making 4% because you're not paying it. Or you could take that money and make 10%. Money's costing you 4%, so your net gain is 6%. So and this isn't guaranteed though, the 10%, so that's the scary part. The last step is to close the purchase, which simply means you have closing costs, which I've mentioned before. Here are all the things that happen you have to pay. When I refinanced my house not too long ago, I had over 25 documents that had to be signed that were involved in all of this. Okay, escrow account just means certain amount of your money goes into an account that like the real estate company will hold to make sure all these things get paid. And that's buying a house or renting an apartment.